Hello, my name's Daniel MacKenzie. I'm a recent graduate of the University of Manchester, just finished a degree in Politics and International Relations, and I'm on Mike Dunn TV.
You are, for the moment. You gave a very interesting presentation about what was more regulation havens rather than tax. There was the other issue, but this is rather, it encompasses everything because it's really all about despots, the Marxists sorting their money around, but specifically, and that's what I'd like you to concentrate on, the arms trade going through tax havens. Tell us a bit about that.
Absolutely. Well, the focus for this talk came from a recognition of a rising debate around tax havens. A lot of them talking about tax havens detracting from the viable state, reducing the tax needed to increase the viable state. I wanted to look at the links between tax havens and human security, basically people dying. The main focus of my talk was on the global arms trade, because the offshore financial system is integral to the global arms trade. As I said in my talk, the shipping companies, the ships, the bank accounts that are used to finance the deals, the companies that are used in order for the deals to bounce off, and also arms brokers like to use UK companies in order to gain legitimacy, so they're much more likely to be able to get
and you had a magic word, secrecy.
Secrecy, absolutely. Tax havens and secrecy jurisdictions are sometimes synonymous. They don't work totally in isolation. What they need is the infrastructure of accountants, bankers and lawyers who know how to service it, who know how to make use of the various regulations, self-serving regulation I like to call it. So I'd like to focus on the accountants.
This blog's a Jersey blog, but you mentioned Channel Islands and you also mentioned the Isle of Man.
Yes, absolutely. In my talk, the example I gave was of a Sudan arms deal. Sudan's had conflict of varying intensities since independence in 1956. The United Nations has had 3 embargoes, 1994, 2004 and 2005, and in 2 separate incidents in 2004 and in 2007, Channel Islands were used in facilitating arms to Sudan, both for the north and for the south, a mixture of heavy weaponry and light arms, aircraft, tanks, all of this used to proliferate the civil conflict which is still going on. South Kordofan's being called the New Darfur, and the Isle of Man and Jersey were instrumental in some of these.
Of course, the world demand for arms does not seem to diminish. And there's all sorts of international treaties being dreamed up to prohibit trade.
Absolutely.
That's a formula to encourage tax havens, isn't it?
Yes.
Or regulation havens.
Yes, well, I think you have to take it in the context of what's happening in Syria. There's lots of condemnation of Russia providing arms to Syria at the moment. This week, starting on the 2nd of July, the United Nations Arms Trade Treaty conference started in New York. It's going to run for 4 weeks. This is, or could be, an opportunity for people who are interested in secrecy jurisdictions to try and influence some policy, because without taking on tax havens and secrecy jurisdictions and the people that service it, we're never going to have effective human security policy.
Have you dealt with Jersey, Guernsey, the Isle of Man trying to get information?
No, I've not done primary research trying to get it from them themselves. Most of my research comes from secondary sources, books. I've had a couple of interviews, one with someone from Jersey, John Christensen, and he introduced me to someone who has done a lot of research on
It's not just the Russians. I mean, people like Rolls-Royce have been involved in some very notorious cases.
Absolutely. BAE, which is the 2nd largest arms manufacturer in the world, likes to say it's British, but it's mainly American, but we'll say for now that it's mainly British because they have massive influence in the Parliament. They've been known to recently, in 2011, be supplying weapons to Saudi Arabia and Bahrain in order totally used to suppress peaceful dissent and, as far as I'm concerned, morally righteous dissent. And we were providing Libya with arms right up until the point we figured out that Gaddafi wasn't popular.
Of course, the great famous Saudi Arabian deal of billions is that
absolutely.
Has Jersey origins. The Qatari recent event, I don't know if you know about the Qatari one, the slush fund and all that.
Yeah, sure. The Al Yamama deal is kind of was a benchmark in looking at offshore deals to do with the arms trade, because the arms the arms trade is the most corrupt market in the world. If you want a country to be buying your arms, quite often you have to convince the officials that it's worth it for them to be spending taxpayers' money. For example, in Tanzania, BAE convinced Tanzania, even though they don't have a military air force, they convinced them to purchase a military radar. And this would have cost 12 million, but they had to mark it up to 40 million to service all the corrupt officials that they needed.
Well, obviously a percentage goes to the lawyers and the accountants in places like Jersey who service these deals, but where in your guess is the real money? Where does it finish up? They've got to do something with it.
Well, that's a difficult question. I'm not one to trust in conspiracy theories, but it does seem to me that the total ignorance of our leaders and the leaders in the developed world is slightly suspect. Either they're incredibly competent, stupid, which is quite likely possible, or they're very well paid.
The apparent ease with which dictators in the past have been salting their money away in places like Jersey, Guernsey and these other places, does that make you suspect that perhaps governments are much more involved with the arms trade than
Absolutely. The arms trade traditionally has massive influence. There's revolving door policy pretty much between Whitehall and the executive office of companies like BAE. That might not have a direct monetary effect, but it's going to have influential effect, definitely.
There's talk in Jersey especially about going independent because they don't like the idea of outside intervention. How would that be? If they might not be able to wave the British flag quite so highly, would that harm their involvement in this trade?
Would it harm their involvement? I don't think that arms manufacturers have particular loyalties to companies. Like I said, BAE likes to say that it's British, but in reality it employs more people in America than it does here. It's only responsible for 2% of manufacturing employment in the UK. If Jersey did second from the United Kingdom, I don't think it would detract from their business. A possible problem is that they might find it harder to get UK exporting licenses because arms manufacturers need legitimate exporting licenses. One
little irony that came up now, they're looking at tasers to be used in Jersey, and they weren't allowed initially. The Home Office decreed it was a foreign territory. They weren't allowed to export them initially, but they've now relaxed that rule so they can. So it's sufficiently British to have tasers. so that might indicate what might happen, perhaps. It's been very good speaking to you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Cheers, Mike.